I baked that cake with the same care I've used every year since 1987. Same chocolate batter, same quiet prayer when I slid it into the oven. And just like always, I wrapped it in foil and placed it gently in my old wicker basket, ready to take to Paul's house. Then the phone lit up. It was a message from Diana. "Don't bring anything. We don't eat your food." No greeting, no thank you. Just that. I stood there with the hot cake cooling in my hands, and I realized I wasn't being excluded from the meal, I was being erased. It's not the first time Diana's words have cut like that, but something in me shifted. Maybe it was the way she didn't even bother to lie, to pretend. Maybe it was the cake. 38 years of tradition dismissed like a dirty napkin. I sat down at the kitchen table, placed the cake between my arms like a wounded thing, and stared at the message again. Paul didn't send it, of course. He never does. He lets her speak for both of them. He's been doing that for years. And I've been letting it happen. I've smiled when Diana rearranged my flowers. I've nodded when she said I shouldn't bake too much sugar for the grandkids. I've kept quiet when she left my name off the invitations. I thought I was keeping the peace. But peace doesn't feel like being ignored. Peace doesn't taste like silence. The house was too quiet. I could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock, loud as a metronome in my chest. I thought about calling Nancy next door, but what would I say? That I baked a cake no one wants? That my daughter-in-law talks to me like I'm the help? I stayed seated. I stared at that chocolate cake and thought about all the ones before it. The birthday with the fire truck when Paul was 5. The one with M&Ms on top when he turned 10. The vanilla mistake I made when he was 15 and how he'd eaten 2 slices anyway. He used to say I made the best cakes in the world. I suppose a woman becomes invisible slowly. First it's her opinions, then her voice, then her food. Before you know it, you're standing in your own kitchen, wondering if showing up would make you the villain in your own son's life. I didn't cry. That's the thing. I wanted to. The sting behind the eyes was there, but I didn't. I cut a slice of the cake and ate it by myself. Still warm, still soft, still mine. That felt important. Then I pulled out the drawer where I keep all the birthday cards. Every single one Paul has ever given me, tucked neatly together with a ribbon. The last 5 were signed only by him. Not a single word from Diana. Last year's had been a printed card with a pre-written poem and Paul underneath. Nothing else. I stood up, put the rest of the cake in the fridge, and took off my apron. Enough. Enough pretending. Enough making myself small so others could feel big. If my cake's not welcome, maybe neither am I. And maybe that's not such a bad thing. I reached for the notebook I keep in the drawer beside the stove. It's where I write down things I need to remember. Recipes, phone numbers, small truths. On the top of a clean page, I wrote, "They don't eat my food, but they still take my money." Because that's what this has been about, hasn't it? Every month, like clockwork, the quiet withdrawals. Ben's school trip needs covering. The roof needs patching. Just until payday. And I've said yes every time, no questions. Because I thought giving meant loving. But now I'm starting to wonder. Maybe it's time to love myself a little more. Maybe it's time to stop feeding people who'd rather starve than sit with me. And so I sat at that same table, the one Paul had done his homework on, where we used to drink cocoa in the winter, and I planned my next steps. No more giving without asking. No more being polite while being erased. I'm 79 years old, and I'm done baking silence into every bite. Tomorrow, I'll go to the bank. The next morning, I ironed my blouse. I hadn't worn that pale blue one in over a year, Too crisp, too formal for grocery runs or quiet afternoons, but it felt right for what I had to do. There's a dignity to pressed cotton, even if no one sees it but the teller behind the desk. At the bank, everything smelled like air conditioning and disappointment. A young man at the counter greeted me with that wide smile people use on old women. Friendly, loud, a little condescending. I gave him my account number without smiling back. He tapped at his keyboard, then looked up. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Ellis?" "I'd like to review my automatic transfers." He blinked. "Of course. To your son's household, correct?" "Correct." Since Paul had started that small landscaping business 5 years ago, he'd asked for help, just for a couple months. The months had turned into years. Diana never asked. Diana just expected. And I'd kept the arrangement, quietly, like I kept the lawn trimmed and the pantry stocked. "They're under Ellis Family Monthly Support," the teller said, scrolling. "Would you like to change the amount?" "I'd like to stop them altogether." He paused. "You want to cancel the transfers?" "I want to stop paying people who won't eat my food." He didn't laugh. He was well trained. Just clicked his mouse and nodded. "It'll take effect next month." I nodded back. "That's fine." I walked home slowly, listening to the leaves rattle in the wind. I hadn't told anyone I was doing this. There would be calls, texts, confusion. But for the first time in years, the thought didn't make me anxious. It made me lighter. At home, I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser and pulled out the folder I'd labeled Paul and Diana. Inside were printed statements, copies of checks, old text messages I'd written down by hand. I added a fresh note at the top. March 18th. Canceled monthly support, $6.50 month. No discussion, no guilt. I put the folder away. Then I made tea and sat at the window, watching the neighborhood come to life. Nancy across the street waved while trimming her roses. I waved back. Her daughter was visiting again, third time this month. I wondered if they were baking together. My phone buzzed around noon. It was a message from Paul. "Hey, Mom, did the bank say something was wrong? Got a notice about the transfer." Not "Hi, Mom," not "How are you," just straight to business. I didn't answer. At 12:32, Diana called. I let it ring. Then I turned the phone off and left it in the kitchen drawer. Let them wonder. Let them feel the itch of silence. I've worn that feeling for years. Time they tried it on. Around 2, I took a walk to the florist. Thelma's shop, bright, overstocked, always smelling of lilies. Thelma smiled when she saw me. "Mrs. Ellis, you haven't been by in ages." "I'd like a bouquet delivered. To myself." She laughed. "To yourself?" Bright colors, ranunculus, tulips, maybe something that doesn't apologize for taking up space. Thelma smiled softer. "I can do that." She didn't ask why. That's the kind of kindness I wish Diana understood, the kind that doesn't dig. I paid in cash, left a tip, and walked home with a slice of sun on my back. When I opened the door, the house was quiet again. But it didn't feel empty. I reheated the leftover cake and ate another slice. Still rich, still soft, still mine. I thought about what else I might change. The will, for one. The deed to this house. I thought about Ben, my grandson. Gentle, awkward Ben, who always helped me carry groceries. The only one who ever thanked me for pie with a hug. There was more I needed to do. But not today. Today, I'd sit with this silence. Not the one they pushed me into, but the one I chose. There's power in not replying. The next morning, I laid out every envelope they'd ever sent me. Not birthday cards, those I kept tied in a ribbon, but the ones marked urgent, please, or just this once. Requests for help that came dressed in pleasantries. There was one from 3 years ago when Ben needed an advanced calculator for AP math. I'd written a check for $120. Later, I saw the receipt. It had gone toward Diana's new handbag. I began a list. Ellis Family Financial History. March 2015, $3,000. Seed money for Paul's business. December 2016, $800 emergency plumbing. Diana's Instagram showed them at a spa. April 2018, $200. Ben's school trip. July 2019, $1,500. Car repairs. November 2020, $250. Groceries. February 2021, $500. Surprise for Diana's birthday. May 2022, $600, just until next paycheck. In total, $11,125 over a decade. I never said no. And yet, this year, I was told not to bring cake. The numbers weren't what hurt me. I would have given twice that without blinking if I felt appreciated. But when love turns into quiet obligation, when giving becomes the only language you're allowed to speak, it hollows you out. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. "Mrs. Ellis, it's been a while," he said. A man in his 50s, warm voice, too many pens in his pocket. "Still keeping things in order?" "Yes," I replied. "But the order's changing." I made an appointment for Thursday. That night, the silence shifted. I didn't just endure it, I filled it. I lit candles. I baked scones just for me. I wrote a letter to myself and signed it like a friend would. "You're not invisible, Maggie. You're just misseen." I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. On Wednesday, Paul showed up at my door. No text, no call, just him and his nervous knock. I didn't pretend to be surprised. "Mom?" he began, eyes darting like he was 12 again and about to admit breaking the window. "Can we talk?" I opened the door wider, but didn't step aside. "Is Diana with you?" "No," he said quickly. "She's at work." I let him in. He sat at the edge of the couch, hands clasped. "Got your message," he said. "I didn't send one." He paused. "Right. I meant about the money. From the bank. I just wanted to see if everything's okay?" I sat across from him. No cake between us this time. "Everything's fine. I just decided to stop giving to people who don't want anything else from me." He looked down. "It's not like that. Isn't it?" He swallowed. "Diana didn't mean anything by that message. She's just very particular. About people or about food?" He didn't answer. "I was going to bring the cake like always," I said, my voice steady. "Same recipe, same care. But it's not the cake, Paul. It's that no one wanted me there." He flinched. "That's not true." "But no one corrected her. You could have said, 'Mom, please come anyway.' You could have called." He rubbed his hands together. "Things have been tense." "And I'm the tension?" "No." He shook his head. "It's just Diana's family celebrates differently. Formal dinners, assigned seats. She doesn't like surprises." I smiled, bitter. 38 years of tradition, and I'm a surprise." He sighed. "We didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did." He looked up. "Are you cutting us off?" "I'm adjusting the terms of our relationship." Silence again, this time heavier. Paul stood, uncertain. "I'll talk to Diana." "You do that," I said. "Meanwhile, I'll talk to my lawyer." He blinked. "Lawyer? For the house, the will, things I should have updated years ago." He tried to smile. "You don't need to do anything drastic." "I'm not angry, Paul. I'm just done playing a role I didn't audition for." He didn't hug me when he left, just nodded and walked out, a man more confused than contrite. When the door clicked shut, I stood for a moment, letting the silence settle around me again. But now it wasn't silence. It was space. And it was mine. Thursday was colder than it should have been for late March. I wore my good coat, the gray wool one with the velvet collar George bought me in '92. It still fit, though the pockets sagged a little now. I put my notebook inside one pocket and my gloves in the other. At 79, you learn to carry things close. The law office sat above a dentist, tucked between a nail salon and a coffee shop that played jazz too loud. The stairs creaked under my weight, but no one offered to help me up them. I didn't need the help anyway. Mr. Kent greeted me with the same firm handshake he always used, as if he wanted to remind me I still mattered. His office smelled like old books and floor polish. I sat in the same leather chair I always used, and he clicked his pen twice before speaking. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Ellis?" "I want to change my will." His eyebrows lifted. "Anything specific?" "I want to remove Paul and Diana as beneficiaries." He didn't flinch, just nodded and opened a drawer. "And leave everything to Benjamin, my grandson." He glanced up. "All of it?" "Every dime." There was silence then, the kind that's not uncomfortable, just weighty. He waited to see if I'd explain. I didn't plan to, but I did. "They've forgotten I'm a person," I said quietly. "Not a wallet, not an obligation, just a mother. And I won't spend what years I have left pretending that kind of treatment is love." He nodded once, respectfully. "Understood." I signed the papers, dated them, watched the notary stamp everything like a slow drumbeat. It felt clean. Back home, I made a pot of lentil soup. I didn't bother setting two places. For years, I'd done that, out of habit, out of hope. One bowl, one spoon, one woman who finally felt her hands on the steering wheel again. That afternoon, I wrote a letter to Ben. "Dear Ben, if you're reading this, then I've finally remembered what my mother taught me when I was your age. Never give away more of yourself than you're willing to lose. I don't know what your parents will say when they find out about the will, but I need you to know it's not revenge. It's a correction, a course reset. You've always treated me like I mattered. I want you to have something that reflects that. And I want you to know something else. They lied to me about your birthday party. Told me not to come. Told me not to bake. Told me, gently, politely, that I was no longer welcome. That hurt more than I expected. But it also woke something in me. You don't have to fix this. You don't have to choose sides. But I want you to know that love, real love, isn't quiet or convenient. It's loud. It shows up. You showed up. So I'm giving you everything. Not just money, but the stories behind it. Ask me about the photo albums sometime. There's more to this house than walls. With love, Grandma Maggie." I folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope, then tucked it in the back of my cookbook, the one he always asked me to use when we made cookies. I'd give it to him in person soon, but not just yet. That evening, I got a text from Diana. "Paul said you're mad. I hope this isn't about the cake. We've moved on from that kind of thing. Hope you're doing well." That kind of thing. I didn't answer. Some things deserve silence. Others, like legacy, memory, dignity, they deserve action. Tomorrow I'd make another list. Not of debts or disappointments, but of what still mattered and who still did. Friday morning, I found myself standing in the sunniest corner of the living room, holding an old Polaroid of Ben at age 7. He was covered in flour, his hands midair, eyebrows raised like he'd just discovered something divine inside a mixing bowl. I'd written a note on the back, "First batch of oatmeal cookies." He added cinnamon without asking. That was the year Diana stopped letting him eat sweets. I pulled out the photo album, the one with the cracked green spine, and flipped through it with fingers that felt steadier than they had in days. Each page held something no one could rewrite. Birthday hats, burnt candles, aprons too big for small shoulders. Ben had always stayed close in the kitchen, even when the rest of the family wandered off to the television or patio wine. He noticed things, like I did. I thought about the letter I wrote him yesterday. I'd tucked it inside the cookbook, but now it felt like it needed a companion. So I took out fresh stationery, the cream-colored kind with gold trim, and began writing again. Ben, I've been thinking about our Tuesdays. Remember those? When I'd pick you up from school and we'd make banana muffins, even when bananas were too ripe or the flour had lumps? I know we haven't had a Tuesday like that in years, but they still live inside me. You didn't just eat my food, you made it with me. That means more than you probably realize. I want you to have that book. The recipes are all there. But so are the memories. Pages smudged with vanilla and pencil notes about more butter next time. They're ours. Not Diana's, not your father's, just ours. If ever you feel lost, you'll find me between those pages. Love, Grandma Maggie. I folded the letter and placed it between pages 34 and 35, right between the sugar cookies and the lemon bars. Later that afternoon, I walked to the post office. My knees weren't thrilled about the trip, but I didn't mind. Movement is a kind of rebellion, too, especially when the world expects you to sit still and fade. The clerk smiled as she weighed the parcel. Sending something sweet? Something rich, I said. And overdue. Back home, I saw a missed call from Paul. And a voicemail. Mom, look. Diana's been upset. She didn't mean to hurt you. You know how she is with food, very particular. Maybe we can do a dinner next weekend. Just us? I'll call again later. No mention of Ben, no apology. Just the usual half-hearted patchwork. I deleted the message. Around 6 p.m., the doorbell rang. Ben stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder, taller than I remembered. His face lit up when I opened the door. Hi, Grandma. I blinked. Well, this is unexpected. I was nearby. Thought I'd check in. Is this a bad time? No, I said, stepping aside. This might be the best time. He stepped in, glancing around like he always used to, taking in the pictures, the smell of tea, the scratch of the radio in the background. I found your note, he said after a moment, pulling it from his coat pocket. The one in the cookbook. You already got it? I stopped by the post office. I know Linda, the clerk. She gave it to me early. I smiled. That's cheating. It's resourceful, he grinned. We sat in the kitchen, where the last rays of light fell across the tile floor like honey. I poured tea. He didn't ask for anything, but he saw the cake tin on the counter. You baked? No reason. Just habit. He opened the tin. It was carrot cake, his other favorite. You remembered, he said. I never forget the people who see me. He looked down, suddenly unsure of himself. I don't know what they told you, but I didn't know. About the party. About the message. If I had... I know, I said. That's why I wrote to you. He took a bite of cake, then just sat there holding the fork like it was something sacred. You always make things feel better. No, I just stopped pretending they're not broken. He stayed longer than I expected. Asked about the flowers on the windowsill, about the book I was reading. He helped me carry laundry upstairs without asking. He moved like someone raised by kindness, not control. When he left, he hugged me the way he used to. Tight, silent, real. After he was gone, I sat down and looked around the kitchen. Nothing had changed, but everything had shifted. And I was just getting started. The house was still the next morning, but not silent. There's a difference. Silence is what you get when no one calls, when messages go unanswered, when the spaces around you feel like an accusation. Stillness, though, that's peace. That's the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of old floorboards under your own step. That's what I had now. I made oatmeal and ate it on the back porch, wrapped in my shawl. The sky was soft with low clouds, and the wind carried the faintest scent of lilac from Nancy's yard. I thought about how many years I'd spent waiting to be called, invited, acknowledged. Waiting for Paul to remember I loved him before Diana corrected him. Waiting for birthdays that came with a text and nothing more. But that kind of waiting, it's a kind of disappearing. You shrink yourself small enough to not take up too much room in their lives, and then one day, you realize they don't see you at all. After breakfast, I opened the big cedar chest in the spare room, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside were remnants of things that had once mattered. George's cufflinks, my wedding veil, Paul's baby blanket, the certificate from Ben's kindergarten spelling bee. I held each piece like a question. Who were we then? Who did we promise to be? And what had we become? I found the quilt I'd started during my chemo treatments 12 years ago. Soft blues and greens, patches from old shirts, curtains, scraps of memory stitched together with hope. I'd stopped working on it when the doctors said I was in remission. Maybe part of me thought I didn't need it anymore. But now I saw it differently. It wasn't about being sick. It was about survival. I brought it downstairs and laid it out on the table, a bit wrinkled, a bit uneven, but honest. I ran my hands over the squares, thinking of what still needed stitching. In the afternoon, Nancy came by with a tin of shortbread cookies. "You've been quiet," she said gently, as if I wasn't always quiet. "Everything all right?" "I think so," I said. "I'm just rearranging." She raised her eyebrows. "Furniture?" "No. Expectations." Nancy chuckled but didn't press. "That's what real friends do. They leave you space." We sat on the porch and shared her cookies. She told me her daughter was taking her to the beach in April. I told her I'd finally canceled Paul's automatic withdrawals. She didn't look surprised, just patted my hand. "Took you long enough," she said. That evening, I pulled out my notepad and made a different kind of list. Not of debts or grievances or who owed me what. This list was for me. Things that are still mine. My recipes, my home, my stories, my silence, my decisions, my name, my Sundays, my laughter when I choose to use it. I stared at the last line and underlined it twice. The phone didn't ring. No texts came. I didn't check. I didn't wait. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and sewed a new square onto the quilt, a piece of my old apron, the one stained with cocoa powder and cinnamon. I stitched it in slowly, carefully. I wanted it to hold. When I went to bed that night, I felt tired, but not drained. There's a difference. One is what the world does to you. The other is what you do for yourself. I chose this tired, and I slept well. On Sunday, Nancy brought over a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. No explanation. Just walked in like she used to before Diana insisted guests call first. "I told my daughter I'm not going anywhere till June," she said, setting the bottle down with a soft thud. She pouted. I smiled. That's how we compromise now. We drank at the kitchen table, my table, the one Diana once called too cluttered. There was a comfort in the clutter. Old coasters, a jar of buttons, a chipped saucer holding tea bags I might reuse. Nancy didn't mind. She never did. "You know," she said, refilling our glasses. "For years, I thought you were just being nice." "I was," I said. "No, I mean, I thought you were letting them treat you like that because you didn't notice, because you didn't care." I looked down at my wine, the way it clung to the glass. I noticed, I said. Every time. I just didn't think I was allowed to say so. Nancy nodded. And now? Now I'm rewriting the rules? She smiled, a quiet one, the kind only old friends know how to give. Well, about damn time. Later, after she left, I sat with her words like they were a new kind of fabric, something soft but strong. I'd spent so many years folding myself into shapes that fit other people's expectations. But what happens when you stop folding? When you just stand? I found myself staring at the hallway mirror, the one I'd avoided lately. My reflection startled me, not because I looked old. I've long made peace with that. But because I looked familiar, like someone I used to know. Someone with sharp eyes and a steady mouth. Someone who knew her worth, even when no one else did. I thought of George, just briefly, of how he'd held my hand at Paul's high school graduation, whispering, "He gets that stubbornness from you." I hadn't felt stubborn back then. Just tired. Always doing. Always smoothing the edges. If George had been here, things might have gone differently. Maybe not with Diana. She always carried her own sharpness. But with Paul, he listened to his father, respected him. I don't think he ever learned to respect me in the same way, not once George was gone, but I was still here. That night, I wrote in my notebook again. I am not a placeholder. I am not a background figure. I am not furniture in someone else's life. I am Margaret Ellis. I bake, I forgive, I remember, and I do not disappear. I slept with the window open, even though it was cold. The air smelled like earth and wood smoke. I let it wrap around me. At dawn, I baked a new cake. Not for anyone else, for me. An orange almond bundt, simple, fragrant, a little sharp on the tongue. I ate the first slice while the sun rose, and I thought, this is what healing tastes like. It doesn't need to be served on a silver tray. It just needs to be served. Monday passed without a single word from Paul or Diana. By Tuesday evening, the silence had grown legs. It walked with me into every room, sat beside me when I read, shadowed me as I stitched the next square into my quilt. A piece of George's old flannel shirt this time, soft, faded blue. There was a time I would have panicked, called, apologized for things I hadn't done, sent an email to clear the air that I never clouded, but not now. Now I brewed tea and let the silence sit where it pleased. I didn't owe it comfort. Midweek, I started cleaning out the attic. Not because it needed it, but because I did. There's something satisfying about choosing what stays and what doesn't. About saying, this mattered once, but it doesn't anymore. I found old linens, Christmas decorations, boxes of things I didn't remember buying. And then, in a yellowed envelope tucked into a tin marked receipts, I found letters. Real ones. From Paul. Written when he was in college. One per month for nearly 2 years. Mom, thanks for the cookies. That girl in my dorm said they're better than her mom's. I miss the kitchen light. It's different here. Cold? You'd like my professor, Dr. Evans. He wears bow ties and swears during lectures. I sat on the attic floor, dust in my nose, hands shaking slightly as I read each one. I'd forgotten he used to be tender. I'd forgotten he'd ever missed me. It broke something in me, but not in the way it used to. This time, I didn't cry. I didn't ache. I just folded the letters neatly and carried them downstairs. Laid them beside my notebook. A reminder that he once knew how to speak without someone else's voice in his mouth. I wondered if that boy still lived somewhere inside the man who let Diana send that message. I wondered if he'd ever knock again. Not for money, not for explanation, but just to say, I see you now. But I wasn't waiting for it. That night, I didn't cook. I opened a can of soup, toasted a heel of bread, and ate at the kitchen counter, the radio low in the background. There's a comfort in simple meals. No performance, no plating, just nourishment. After dinner, I called the community center, asked if they still needed volunteers for the baking class on Thursdays. "Absolutely," the woman said. "You're Margaret Ellis, right? You used to bring cookies to the library?" "I did. We'd be honored to have you." And just like that, I made space for something new. Not as a replacement, as a return. Thursday came, and I wore my old apron, the one Ben drew a cat on in Sharpie when he was 4. "Because you're always soft like cats," he'd said. The class was full of people who reminded me of younger versions of myself, unsure hands, uncertain smiles. I taught them how to measure flour without packing it, how to tell when a cake is done by listening. "You don't stab it," I said, laughing. "You just lean in. A quiet cake is a finished cake." They laughed. They listened. When I walked home, the street was quiet but not empty. Porch lights glowed. A cat darted across the sidewalk. Someone was playing jazz through a cracked window. The world hadn't changed. But I had. When I got inside, there was a voicemail waiting. "Diana, I know you're upset, but it's unfair to punish everyone. Ben's still a child. He shouldn't be caught in the middle. Let's talk." Unfair. I sat with that word. Then I deleted the message. Some things don't deserve a reply. Ben came by again on Saturday. No warning, no text. Just the sound of his knock. 3 short taps and a pause. Same rhythm he used when he was 10, sneaking out of the rain with a library book tucked under his jacket. I opened the door, and he grinned like he wasn't sure he'd be welcome. "You always knock like you're not sure I'll answer," I said. "I always hope you do," he replied. This time, he brought a small paper bag. Inside was a jar of honey from the farmer's market and a handwritten note. "For your tea. Thought you might want something sweet that isn't from them." We sat at the kitchen table, and I steeped 2 mugs. The honey was dark and floral, thick as memory. He stirred his slowly, watching the swirls settle. "They're upset," he said finally. "My parents. I'm not surprised. They think you're retaliating." I sipped my tea. "Is that what you think?" He looked at me, really looked, the way people do when they've run out of scripts. "No," he said. "I think you're reclaiming something." I nodded. "That's a better word." He hesitated. "Dad said you're changing the will." "I already did." He didn't blink. "And I'm in it?" "You are it." Silence. I don't know what to say. "Then don't. Just know that it wasn't a reward. It was recognition." His eyes softened. "I'm not perfect, Grandma." "You were never supposed to be." He sat back. "They said you're trying to divide us." "Ben, I'm not building walls. I'm just choosing where my door is and who gets a key." He looked down at his mug. "I feel like I'm the only one who sees it clearly. The way they talk to you. The way they rewrite things after the fact. You see it because you've lived with it. I just baked around it." He laughed quietly. "I think that's the most brutal sentence I've ever heard." "It's not brutal. It's honest." We didn't talk much after that. Sometimes the best conversations are the ones with nothing left to prove. He stayed for dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, and helped me fix the screen door that had been sticking. Before he left, he paused at the door. "Can I come again next week?" "You don't need permission." "I think I do." "Then you have it. Always." He hugged me again, longer this time. Tighter. Like something had shifted between us, something permanent. After he left, I stood at the sink washing dishes, watching the last light bleed from the sky. There was a quiet inside me that felt earned, not forced, not empty. The phone rang once that evening. I didn't pick up. I knew the number. I didn't need the voice. Instead, I wrote another note in my notebook. He asked to come back. Not because he needed something, just because he wanted to. That matters. That changes things. That stays. I turned off the kitchen light, sat by the window. The night outside was full of small sounds: wind, leaves, the hush of a world turning. And somewhere in that hush, I heard something else. Not an apology, but respect. On Monday, I laid out every birthday card I'd ever received from Paul since he married Diana. 12 cards. 12 years. Most were generic, with printed poems and signatures that looked rushed. Only the first one had a personal note. Thanks for always being there. Diana and I are lucky to have you. That was the year she still called me Mrs. Ellis, before she started calling me Paul's mom in that flat, careful tone she used when trying not to show her disdain. I placed that first card on top of the stack, then tied them together with twine, not to keep, but to return. That afternoon, I called my lawyer again. I asked him to prepare a letter, a simple statement confirming the updated will, addressed directly to Paul and Diana. No bitterness, no accusations. Just facts. They would receive it by week's end. I didn't want to blindside them, but I also didn't want to leave them with illusions. That time was over. Then I sat down with my folder of records, the Paul and Diana folder, and made copies. Bank statements, canceled checks, emails requesting support. I didn't need them for court or conflict. I needed them for clarity. For Ben. Because someday, when he asks why things changed, I want him to have more than stories. I want him to have truth he can touch. By evening, I'd worn myself out. I made tea and sat by the fire, the quilt across my knees, sewing the next square. This one was from an old dish towel. Faded sunflowers in the corner. Bright, even after all these years. The phone rang. It was Paul. I let it go to voicemail, but this time, I listened. Mom, we got your letter. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this isn't the way. Cutting us out? Over cake? Over one message? Diana's hurt. She feels attacked. I don't know what you want from us. Then, after a pause, I guess I just thought you were better than this. I replayed that last sentence in my head. Better than this. As if enduring quiet disrespect with a smile was virtue. As if allowing myself to be used without protest was strength. As if love meant never disappointing those who disappointed me. No, Paul, I'm not better than this. I'm finally better than that. I wrote a note in my notebook. They'll tell the story their way. Let them. My version lives in the doing, not the explaining. That night, I pulled out the recipe box again, the one I hadn't opened since before all this began. I flipped through cards written in my own hand, ink fading, corners smudged, each one a memory, a ritual, a kindness. I stopped at the card for chocolate birthday cake, Paul's favorite, the one I used every year right up until the message came. I took it out. Not to bake, not yet, but to keep visible. Some things you don't hide, even when others reject them, especially then. Ben's message came on Thursday afternoon, just as I was pulling a pie from the oven. Grandma, I want to invite you to something. Small thing, no pressure. Just come if you want. It's not theirs. It's mine. Attached was a photo of a handwritten invitation. Nothing formal, just black ink on cream paper. Saturday at 3. Tea and sweets. You, me, and the good kind of silence. I smiled so suddenly I startled myself. The scent of cinnamon and butter curled around me, warm and unbothered. I set the pie to cool and sat at the table, invitations still glowing on my phone. No explanations, no performance, just a welcome. Saturday came with sun, unexpected for April, soft and slanted through clouds. I wore a navy cardigan, the one with mother-of-pearl buttons, and packed a tin of lemon scones I'd made that morning. No frills, just flour and care. Ben met me at the door. He'd rented the back room of the small bookshop near the library, one of those hidden places that smell like paper and time. The room had a few tables, scattered chairs, a strand of lights overhead, and cake. Not mine, but close. A chocolate cake sat at the center, homemade, a little lopsided, glazed with something thick and glossy. "I made it," Ben said, watching my eyes. "You did?" "I used your recipe, the one in the blue box, page 9. I felt the breath catch in my chest. "It's not perfect," he added quickly. It sank a little. "It rose enough," I said. We sat. There were no speeches, no forced smiles. Just a table, 2 cups of tea, and the kind of quiet that holds space, not judgment. After a while, he spoke. "I wanted this to be just us, not a statement, not some stand." "It doesn't have to be anything," I said. "It already means everything." He nodded. "I told them I invited you. Mom said I was being dramatic. Dad just looked tired." "I imagine he is. They're losing their grip on the version of me they curated." I smiled faintly. "They'll survive." He reached into his backpack and pulled out the cookbook I'd given him, the old one, with flour still in the creases. He placed it between us. "I keep this on my shelf, next to the photos from when I still thought everyone was good. And now? I think people are complicated, but I know who makes me feel whole." There was nothing more to say. I reached out, touched the corner of the book, then his hand. Small things, steady things. Before I left, he cut 2 slices of the cake and packed one for me. "For later," he said. "When I got home, I didn't eat it right away. I placed it on the counter. Let it sit. Let it exist. Because this one wasn't about being accepted. This one was about being remembered." Sunday evening brought an unexpected knock. Not Ben's, not Nancy's. Paul. I saw him through the front window before I opened the door. Alone, holding nothing. No flowers, no excuses. Just a furrowed brow and the look of a man sent, not summoned. I opened the door without a word. "Can I come in?" he asked. "That depends," I said. "Is this a visit or a performance?" He flinched. "A visit, I think." I stepped aside. He sat stiffly on the living room couch, hands on his knees like a schoolboy waiting for a lecture. I didn't offer tea, didn't sit. I stood near the window, hands lightly clasped, watching the last light gather in the corners. "I saw Ben's post," he began. "Which one?" "The cake. He said you baked again." I never stopped. He looked up. "Why didn't you tell me how much you were hurt?" "I did. In every quiet yes I gave you. In every time I showed up after being told not to. In every slice of cake you didn't notice was still warm." He exhaled. "You changed the will." "I had to." "But why everything?" "Because I want what I leave behind to reflect what I gave, and who gave back." Paul rubbed his temples. "You raised me to be better than this." "No, I raised you with love. Being better was always your choice." He looked small then, not like a boy, not like a man, just shrinking under the weight of a truth too long ignored. "I didn't know how bad it had gotten," he said quietly. "You didn't want to know." He didn't argue. I told Diana not to send that message, he muttered. She said it was easier. Easier than telling me in person I wasn't wanted? He was silent. I didn't come here to fight, he finally said. I just wanted to see if it's too late. I thought about that. Too late. It's not a door slamming. It's a door slowly, slowly swinging shut after years of standing wide open with no one walking through. It's not too late to speak, I said, but it might be too late to speak for both of you. He looked at me, really looked, like Ben had. I miss the kitchen, he said softly. I know. I miss when it was easy. It was never easy. It was just quiet. He nodded. I think I've been quiet too long. And I've been polite too long. He stood. I'm sorry. I didn't rush to accept it. I let it sit between us, heavy and real. Then let your actions be the apology, I said. He nodded. I'll try. Before he left, he hesitated by the door. Do you want to come next week? Just dinner. Just us. I'll think about it. That was the most honest answer I could give. After he left, I sat in the silence he left behind. It didn't ache. It didn't accuse. It just was. And that, finally, felt like something I could live with. I didn't call him back, didn't text, didn't mark my calendar. All week, the dinner invitation hovered in the air like a coat left draped on a chair, visible, familiar, but not quite mine to carry. I went about my days as usual, quilting, reading, volunteering at the baking class, where one of the younger women cried after her first successful sponge. It's not just a cake, she whispered. It's something I made. I nodded. I knew. On Friday, I walked to the market and bought apricots. I hadn't bought them in years. Diana said they made the kitchen smell too nostalgic. But I liked that smell. Apricots and brown sugar, and something old and tender curling in the air. I made jam, filled 3 small jars, labeled them with quiet satisfaction, Ellis Apricot 2025. I placed one in the cupboard, gave one to Nancy, and kept one for Ben. I didn't tell Paul. Saturday came, clear skies, cool breeze. I wore my simple dress, the one with tiny birds on the hem, and waited until 5 p.m., 2 hours past dinner. He hadn't followed up, hadn't reminded, hadn't insisted. At 5:15, the phone rang. Hi, Mom. Hello, Paul. I wasn't sure if you were coming. You didn't ask if I was available? Silence. We still have food, he said. Diana made that quinoa salad you used to like. I never liked it. Oh, anything else? I just wanted to talk again. Then talk. He hesitated. I could hear the clatter of cutlery in the background, the muffled sound of Ben's voice, then Diana saying something sharp and short. You know, he said slowly, I think I used to think you'd always be there. I was. I mean, no matter what. That's not love, Paul. That's assumption. More silence. Then he said it, the sentence I hadn't expected. She doesn't like how you remind me of who I used to be. I sat down. Then she should have married someone else. She liked that version of me when it was useful. And now? She finds him inconvenient. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So I did neither. I want you to know, he continued, that I remember the real things. Not just the arguments, the warmth, the cinnamon, the birthdays. The times you said yes before I even asked. I remember too. I think I lost you while trying not to lose her. You don't have to choose, Paul. You just have to see clearly. He took a breath. I want to visit. Just me. No agenda. Then come as you are. No explaining, no defending, just arrive. I will. We hung up, and I sat at my table, the apricot jam cooling beside me, the quiet returning like an old friend. It wasn't resolution. Not yet. But it was a beginning. And sometimes beginnings are the most honest thing we have left. He came on Sunday. No fanfare, no noise. Just Paul, holding a grocery bag with 2 apples and a loaf of bread that looked like it had come from the overpriced bakery near their house. His shirt was untucked, his eyes uncertain. "I didn't know what to bring," he said. "You didn't have to bring anything." He stepped inside. The last time he'd been here without Diana was years ago. Maybe since Ben was in middle school. The house looked the same, but I could see him registering the changes, the extra quilt on the couch, the baking tins on the shelf, the missing family photo from the mantel. I didn't offer tea. He followed me into the kitchen anyway, setting the bread down with a sigh. "I've been thinking," he said, "about all of it. The money, the cake, the will." I let him talk. "I think I got used to thinking you'd bend, that you'd keep saying yes. You got used to me disappearing." He looked up. "Yeah, I did." He sat in the chair across from mine, the same chair he used to occupy when he was 10 and sulking over math homework. "I used to love your cooking," he said. "Diana said it was too heavy. I stopped asking for it." "I know." He rubbed his hands together. "I didn't realize how far we'd drifted." "We didn't drift, Paul. You put up fences and asked me to knock before entering." He blinked. "I kept knocking until I stopped." He looked ashamed, but it wasn't performative. It was tired, real. I let the silence hang. "She says you've poisoned Ben." I raised my eyebrows. "Is that what she thinks love looks like?" "She thinks any difference is rebellion." "Then she's not ready for truth." He nodded, slowly. "I think I let her shape too much of the story." "And you stayed quiet because it was easier." "Yes." "Was it worth it?" "No." He looked down at the table. I reached over and slid the recipe card toward him. The chocolate cake, the one he'd loved before silence became the rule. He took it, gently, as if it were something fragile. Can I come back sometime?" "You just did." He smiled, barely, but enough. Before he left, I handed him a jar of apricot jam. "Tell her it's from the market if you need to." He laughed, the sound unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. "Will you come to dinner next month?" he asked. "Something different, just you and me." "I'll think about it." That was the agreement now. Nothing automatic, nothing owed, just choices. Clear ones. When the door closed behind him, I didn't cry. I didn't hope. I just stood in the stillness and felt something settle. Not closure, not forgiveness, but clarity. And that, for the first time, was enough. A week passed, then another. I baked. I quilted. I taught a class on gingerbread that ended with 3 grown women crying, not over dough, but because it was the first thing they'd made that someone actually complimented. Ben came by every Thursday now. No announcement, no hesitation. He brought coffee once, forgot sugar, laughed at himself, then drank it bitter, just to prove he could. I made pancakes and told him he'd never need to prove anything here. Nancy and I sat in the garden and talked about death, not morbidly, just honestly, about what we'd leave behind, what would outlive us. "Not things," she said, "just gestures, and the people who notice them." Paul texted, twice. Nothing demanding, just updates, small truths. "I'm planting dahlias this year." "Ben helped me fix the garage light." I replied once. Nice. That felt right. Diana never called. I stopped wondering if she would. Some women are not made for softness, but they expect it from others. And when you stop offering it, they call it war. Let her. My silence is not an attack. It's an answer. I updated my will again, not legally, just in spirit. I wrote a letter to Ben to be read after I'm gone. I placed it beneath the recipe box, folded with care. If you're reading this, it means the world kept going. Good. It should. You'll know by now who you are and what you've done with what I left you. I don't care if you spent the money. I care if you remembered where it came from. I don't care if you changed the curtains. I care if the kitchen still smells like something warm. Don't let them rewrite me. I wasn't angry. I was awake. I wasn't bitter. I was done. And I wasn't vengeful. I was finally honest. Live the same. That's all I want. Last Sunday, I sat on the porch with the quilt over my knees and watched the neighborhood kids play. One of them, a girl with crooked pigtails and scraped knees, ran past and called out, "Hi, baking lady." I laughed and waved. She ran off before I could ask her name. I'll make cookies next week, just in case she circles back. Sometimes kindness leaves echoes. Sometimes dignity is passed like flour through a sieve, light, even, patient. I gave my life in handfuls. Some people called it too much, but that's only because they never measured what they took. I am 79 years old. I have lived through hunger, through grief, through silence, but also through joy, through cinnamon, through voices that soften when they say my name. This story didn't end the way I imagined. It ended better, because it ended with me, whole. So if you're reading this and you've ever felt erased, ever felt like your care was overlooked, don't wait for permission to matter. Stand up. Speak calmly. Reclaim your table. And if you've ever baked something for someone who never said thank you, bake it again, but this time for yourself. If this story made you feel something, if you saw your mother, your friend, or even yourself in it, leave a comment. Share it. Let someone else know they're not alone. The quiet ones have voices too, and they deserve to be heard.